Shellshock Chapter 2. Later that day, after cashing his check for the photos, Peter Parker found himself standing in the sleek lobby of the Wakandan embassy. The air was quiet, serene, but Peter's mind was anything but. There was something about Shellshock's armor that had been gnawing at him since their fight. The way it absorbed and released kinetic energy to amplify strikes. It wasn't as advanced as T'Challa's Black Panther armor, but the similarities were undeniable. Peter was hoping to speak to Shuri, T'Challa's brilliant younger sister, about the possibility of a connection. After a brief conversation with the receptionist, he learned that T'Challa, like Tony Stark, was off-world, dealing with some Kree civil war. Now he was stuck waiting to see if Shuri would even entertain his questions. Sitting in the embassy's pristine lobby, Peter tapped his foot nervously. Maybe I should have come as Spiderman, he thought. They probably would have taken me more seriously. Across the room, the receptionist was sipping her coffee, casually playing a mobile game on her phone, completely ignoring him. Lost in thought, Peter didn't notice Okoye, the formidable leader of the Dora Milaje, approach him. "Peter Parker?" she said, her voice commanding yet calm. Peter snapped out of his thoughts and stood abruptly. Yes, that's me." "Come with me, please," she said, turning sharply and leading him down a corridor. Peter followed quickly, his sneakers squeaking against the polished floor. The hallway opened into an office that was both elegant and steeped in Wakandan culture. Intricately carved wood adorned the walls, and shelves were lined with artifacts that radiated history and sophistication. Okoye gestured to a chair in front of her large wooden desk and sat down behind it. Peter eased into the seat, feeling more nervous than ever. "So, thanks for seeing me. I was hoping to speak with Shuri, actually." Okoye leaned back slightly, studying him. "Shuri is unavailable at the moment, but perhaps I can assist you." "What is it you wish to discuss, Mr. Parker?" "Well," Peter began, crossing his fingers nervously, "I'm dealing with someone, a guy who's using a battle suit. It's turtle-themed." He winced, realizing how ridiculous that sounded. "I know it sounds weird, but the suit stores and releases kinetic energy, kind of like how T'Challa's Black Panther suit does. Somehow be connected to Wakanda?" Okoye raised an eyebrow. "Wakanda does not have any enemies themed after turtles," she said, her voice betraying no amusement. "Are you certain this man is using technology similar to ours?" Peter nodded quickly. "I mean, it's not as advanced as Wakandan tech, but the principle seems really similar. I thought there might be a connection." Okoye leaned forward, her piercing gaze locking onto him. "I am positive that no Wakandan technology has been shared or stolen in this way, but I will investigate your claims." Just as Peter was about to thank her, a deafening explosion shook the building, rattling the windows and knocking a vase from a shelf. The two of them turned toward the sound as shouting erupted from the lobby. Peter stood, heart racing. "What was that?" he asked, already knowing the answer. Okoye grabbed a sleek 6-inch cylinder from her desk. She twisted it, and it extended into a gleaming vibranium spear. Her expression was calm but deadly serious. "It seems your turtle has arrived." Peter's eyes widened. "Shellshock?" Okoye nodded, standing with practiced grace. "Perhaps you should change into something more appropriate," she said, striding toward the door without looking back. Peter nodded, darting down the hallway toward the nearest restroom to change into his Spider-Man suit. As he pulled on the mask, he could hear Shellshock's voice booming from the lobby. Okoye stood firm, her spear raised in a defensive stance, her eyes locked onto Shellshock. Her voice was steady and unwavering. "You are trespassing on Wakandan soil. Leave immediately." Shellshock tilted his head, then glanced at the polished floor beneath his metallic boots. "Huh," he said, mockingly inspecting his feet. "I don't see any dirt anywhere. You sure this counts as soil?" Okoye didn't flinch, her grip tightening on her spear. "Why are you here?" she demanded, taking a deliberate step forward, her every movement radiating authority. Shellshock shrugged casually, the blue glow of his armor pulsing slightly as he tapped his chest. "You wouldn't believe it," he said with a smirk, "but I'm actually here for that spear you're holding." Okoye's eyes narrowed, her scowl deepening. "A spear is a Wakandan warrior's sacred weapon. You might as well try to take my heart. Shellshock's gaze wandered up and down her form, a smug grin spreading across his face. You're totally my type. So what are you doing later? I don't find you funny, Okoye replied flatly, her tone sharp enough to cut through steel. That's fine, Shellshock said, shrugging again. Like I said, I'm here for the spear. Hand it over, and maybe I won't break everything in here. Okoye spun her spear in a graceful arc, the tip glinting dangerously in the light. If you want my spear, come and claim it. Shellshock chuckled, his armor humming as it powered up. Figured you'd say that. Without warning, he charged forward, his massive frame moving with surprising speed, the ground trembling slightly beneath his steps. Okoye didn't hesitate. As Shellshock barreled toward her, she shifted into a low stance, the spear poised for a counterattack. Her movements were precise, her focus unshakable. The clash was imminent, and the battle for the Wakandan embassy was about to begin. Shellshock lunged at Okoye with a thundering charge, his glowing gauntlets aimed to crush her. But Okoye was faster. With a fluid motion, she sidestepped his attack, her vibranium spear slicing through the air toward his exposed side. The spear struck true, sparks flying as it glanced off the turtle-like armor covering his body. Nice try, Shellshock quipped, turning with a swift backhand that Okoye ducked under effortlessly. But you're going to need more than a fancy toothpick to crack this shell. Okoye twirled her spear, maintaining a defensive stance. Your arrogance will be your undoing, she said calmly. She lunged forward, aiming for a joint in his armor, but Shellshock blocked the strike with his arm, his armor absorbing the kinetic energy and glowing brighter. See what I mean? Shellshock grinned as he unleashed a concussive shockwave from his gauntlet, forcing Okoye to leap back to avoid the blast. The wave sent nearby furniture and artifacts flying, but Okoye landed gracefully, unshaken. Shellshock pressed the attack, throwing a flurry of punches and sweeping strikes. Okoye evaded each one with precision, her spear a blur as she deflected his attacks. She used the environment to her advantage, flipping over a fallen table and luring him into overextending his reach. Her spear lashed out, striking his knee joint and momentarily destabilizing him. Shellshock growled in frustration. You're good, he admitted, stepping back to regain his footing. But let's see how you handle this. With a sudden motion, his armor's energy conduits flared, and he slammed both fists into the ground. A powerful shockwave rippled through the room, shattering windows and shaking the floor. Okoye was forced to leap high into the air, narrowly avoiding the destructive blast. She landed gracefully, her spear still at the ready. You rely too much on your armor, she said, her tone almost mocking. Without it, you are nothing. That so? Shellshock smirked. Let's test that theory. He charged again, faster this time, his fists swinging in wide arcs. Okoye ducked under a strike and used her spear to vault over him, landing behind him with a swift kick to his lower back. The impact caused him to stumble, but he quickly recovered, spinning to face her. Their battle raged on, Okoye's agility and precision clashing with Shellshock's raw power and relentless attacks. The room became a battlefield, with fragments of destroyed furniture and shattered glass littering the floor. Just as the fight seemed to reach a standstill, a familiar voice echoed from above. Looks like I'm late to the party, Spiderman quipped, flipping down from the ceiling. He landed on a wall, sticking there as he took in the chaotic scene. You guys couldn't wait for me? Okoye glanced at him briefly. This is no time for jokes, Spiderman. Shellshock, meanwhile, groaned audibly. Oh, great. Bug Boy's back. He pointed a gauntlet at Spiderman. Didn't you get enough last time? Funny, I was going to ask you the same thing, Spiderman said, firing a web at Shellshock's face. The sticky thread splattered across the villain's visor, momentarily blinding him. Gah! Cheap tricks! Shellshock roared, swiping at his helmet to clear the webbing. Spiderman flipped into the fray, landing beside Okoye. You okay? He asked. I had him under control, Okoye replied coolly. But your assistance is welcome. Good. Because I don't think Turtle Guy here plays fair, Spiderman said, dodging a wild swing from Shellshock. The two heroes worked together seamlessly. Okoye's precision strikes distracted Shellshock, creating openings for Spider-Man to use his agility and webbing to tie up the villain's movements. Shellshock, however, was no pushover. His armor absorbed the impacts of Okoye's spear and Spider-Man's punches, glowing brighter with each hit. "Any brilliant ideas, Spider-Man?" Okoye asked, spinning her spear to deflect another blast. "I'm working on it," Spider-Man said, swinging around Shellshock and landing a kick to the back of his knee, causing him to stagger. "This guy's armor is like a bad Wi-Fi connection, too much input and it's gonna crash." "Then let us overload it," Okoye said with a nod. Spider-Man grinned under his mask. "Now you're speaking my language." They began a coordinated assault, focusing their attacks on Shellshock's armor. Spider-Man shot webs at his armor's energy conduits, clogging them with sticky strands, while Okoye delivered precise, rapid strikes to his joints. Shellshock roared in frustration as his armor began to spark and malfunction. "You think this is enough to stop me?" he bellowed, charging at both of them in a final, desperate attempt to regain control. Spider-Man leapt high into the air, while Okoye sidestepped and delivered a powerful strike to his exposed side. The combined force of their attacks caused Shellshock's armor to overload, emitting a blinding burst of light before powering down. The villain collapsed to one knee, breathing heavily as smoke rose from his malfunctioning suit. Spider-Man landed beside Okoye, both of them standing over the defeated Shellshock. "Looks like you're out of juice, buddy," Spider-Man said, crossing his arms. Okoye raised her spear, pointing it at Shellshock's chest. "You are finished. Surrender now or face the consequences." Shellshock, battered but not entirely beaten, gritted his teeth. "This isn't over," he growled, activating a hidden mechanism in his suit. A secondary shockwave blasted outward, forcing both Spider-Man and Okoye to retreat momentarily. "You think you've won?" he growled, glancing toward the ceiling. A wicked grin spread across his face. "Let's see how you handle this." Before either hero could react, Shellshock fired a powerful blast upward. The explosion shook the entire embassy, and chunks of the ceiling began to collapse. "Look out!" Spider-Man yelled, his spider sense flaring as he saw the receptionist frozen in terror beneath the falling debris. Without hesitation, he shot a web toward a large piece of rubble, swinging it out of the way just in time. Then, with another burst of webbing, he pulled the receptionist to safety, shielding her as the debris crashed to the floor. "Don't mention it," Spider-Man said as the receptionist stammered her thanks, his voice steady despite the chaos. Meanwhile, Okoye seized the opportunity. As Shellshock turned to survey the damage, she lunged forward with a fierce battle cry, driving her vibranium spear straight into his armor. The weapon pierced through the turtle like plating, pinning him against the wall. Sparks flew, and Shellshock groaned in pain, glancing down at the spear embedded in his chest. "I'm usually into this sort of thing," he quipped, smirking despite the situation. "But hey, I got what I came for." Before Okoye could react, Shellshock grabbed the spear with one arm, his gauntlet glowing as he absorbed the kinetic energy. With a powerful shove, he pushed Okoye back and slammed his armored body into the wall behind him. The impact caused the wall to crumble, and Shellshock tumbled through it, landing in the alley outside the embassy. Spider-Man darted toward the hole, calling out, "You okay, Okoye?" Okoye dusted herself off, her expression unreadable. "He has my spear," she said, her voice low and dangerous. Spider-Man leapt outside, landing beside her in the dimly lit alley. The street was empty, save for the debris and the faint hum of Shellshock's armor fading into the distance. "He's gone," Okoye said angrily, her hands clenched into fists. Spider-Man turned to her, frowning beneath his mask. "What did he want your spear for?" Okoye shook her head, her frustration evident. "I haven't the slightest clue," she said, her voice firm but edged with concern. "But I will find out. No one steals from Wakanda and escapes justice." Spider-Man nodded. "Guess we're both adding tracking down a guy in turtle armor to our to-do lists." Okoye looked at him sharply, but her expression softened slightly. "Thank you, Spider-Man," she said, "for saving my people." "Anytime," he replied, giving her a small salute before glancing at the hole in the embassy. But maybe we should think about getting that fixed before the next bad guy shows up. Okoye's gaze turned steely again. The next time Shellshock appears, he will regret it. Spiderman grinned beneath his mask. That's what I like to hear. Hours later, Peter Parker sat slumped in his small Queens apartment, his cluttered desk illuminated by the glow of his computer monitor. Spread out before him were the remnants of a long night, his camera, a few half-empty cups of coffee, and the pieces of tech he'd managed to snag during his encounter with Shellshock. The turbines he'd retrieved from the villain's armor lay on the desk, their metallic surfaces scratched but intact. Peter had been running scans and searching online for hours, trying to find anything that could give him a lead. Were these turbines custom-made, reverse-engineered? Did they match the tech of any known company? So far, every result was a dead end. Come on, Peter muttered, leaning closer to the screen as he ran yet another comparison algorithm. You've got to give me something. The progress bar crawled forward at a snail's pace. Peter sat back in his chair with a frustrated groan, scratching his head. All he knew about Shellshock so far was that he had a penchant for high-tech gear, a weird fascination with Wakandan spears, and an ego as big as his armor. Beyond that, nothing. This guy's like a bad video game boss, Peter muttered to himself, big, flashy, annoying, and I still don't know what his endgame is. He glanced over at the turbines again, his mind racing. Shellshock's armor clearly required an immense amount of power to function. His obsession with Stillwell's prototype fuel cell and now the theft of a Wakandan vibranium spear couldn't be random. Was he trying to combine vibranium's energy-absorbing properties with another power source? But for what purpose? Peter scratched his chin. Maybe I should talk to Stillwell, he thought aloud, spinning his chair idly. It was his device that got stolen at the expo. If anyone has an idea why Shellshock would need it, it's him. He paused. Unless. A new thought entered his mind, one he hadn't considered before. What if Shellshock wasn't working alone? What if these weren't isolated heists, but parts of a bigger plan? 2 high-profile thefts in a row, Stillwell's device and Okoye's spear, might point to someone orchestrating this from behind the scenes. Shellshock could be working for a third party, maybe even a fourth. Someone who needed the combination of vibranium and advanced energy tech. Or, Peter muttered, maybe this guy's just a kleptomaniac who likes shiny things. He groaned again, running his hands through his hair. The truth was, he had no idea. No clue who Shellshock really was, no understanding of his motives, and no lead on where he'd strike next. All he had was a pair of broken turbines, a lot of questions, and a gut feeling that things were only going to get worse. Peter leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. Okay, think, he said to himself. What's the next move? His first thought was to suit up and patrol the city, hoping Shellshock might show his face again. But that was a long shot, and Peter needed answers now. His second thought was to reach out to Okoye and the Wakandans. They might have more intel on the spear and its potential significance. Then there was Stillwell, who could shed light on why Shellshock wanted the fuel cell in the first place. Peter sighed and stood up, pacing his tiny apartment. I'm going to need all the help I can get on this one, he said, grabbing his mask from the desk. As he stared at it, a small smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. And maybe I'll work on my jokes, he added. If I'm going to keep up with Turtle Boy, I've got to step up my game. With that, Peter began piecing together a plan, knowing full well that the next encounter with Shellshock would be even more dangerous.
Next time on Shellshocked.